everyone to another Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord Q&A with John Vervaeke. Thanks for being here again, John.
Always my pleasure, guys. Always my pleasure.
So we've got a bunch of people here, and we already have some questions queued up. So like always, if you could queue up your questions in the event text, which is right above the event hall recording here in the Discord. If you want me to read out your question, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume you want to read your own question. And let's just get right into it. Struan, you have a question for John.
Hi, John.
Hi, Struan. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, it's good to hear your voice as well. Okay, so I'm just going to read this out. So the narrative practice hypothesis is based on the idea that narrative doesn't come naturally to us. It's something that we have to work at. But if we have to practice narrative, then it is possible that we have been practicing narrative incorrectly. I recall you saying elsewhere that something can't be a narrative if it doesn't have something resembling a complete ending. But have you ruled out the possibility that there could be other ways of construing a narrative? With this in mind, why isn't dialogos a practicing of the art of narrative?
Yeah. So when I understand your question, and I think the intent is a very good question. I took narrative to be what had to have sort of the constituent features that Hutto argues are needed in order to perform its function. So you need character, you need plot, you need flash forward, flash back, and you need conflict resolution. There has to be a problem that requires you, at least vicariously, plugging into the distributed cognition within the story in order to solve the problem. And so I took it that two things. One thing I argued is that we shouldn't think of narrative as intrinsic to us, and you've already acknowledged that, at least as a good supposition, and that there are states in which people go trans-narrative. And I took Hutto. I'm going to evoke somebody, and I'm going to be talking to him soon. So this is not just promissory, Struan. I'm going to actually be talking to James Cars. And I took narrative, at least the way it's classically understood, to be something like having a resolution, a denouement, a climax, and all of that, etc. And therefore to be an example of what Cars calls a finite game, where I took that some of the things that are supposed to be happening in dialogos and in related individual experiences of self-transcendence as be more an example of what Cars calls an infinite game, where you're not seeking resolution. In fact, what you're constantly doing, if you're constantly sort of trying to gradually rewrite and evolve the rules by which the game is played, because the main purpose of the game is to continue and deepen the involvement in the playing of the game. And I took Dialogos to be an example of that. So that's what I was thinking. I'm interested in hearing your feedback on it. That's why I made the move I made. Obviously, I haven't given you any kind of a priori closure argument. I'm just explaining to you my thinking about why I did it the way I did. What do you think about that? How would you like to respond to that?
Well, it just strikes me that we talk about resolution, right? You also in Dialogos talk about getting to a place where you couldn't get on your own.
Right.
It seems to me that there's a similarity between the resolution and getting into that new place.
Yeah. Right.
But it's not complete or it's not full. But it's like an ongoing playing, right? So we have this idea of like the narrative broke because, well, at least in part, when the final cause was split off from the scientific worldview, then the picture of the narrative became nonsensical in a sort of a sense. And so the question is, how do we rebuild it? And what I see you doing through Dialogos is rebuilding the narrative.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's narrative. Or at least it's trans-narrative, right? You're with me in acknowledging it's not traditional or classical narrative, right? Because
you're playing with the narrative, and you can't have a particular narrative presupposed when you're playing with the narrative. Definitely.
Right. So, right. And the idea, it would be more like the old that subgenre that was always sort of questioned by people, like the books that they don't do them anymore because of the internet and stuff. But I don't know if they still do them or not. I shouldn't be presumptuous. You choose your own adventure kind of thing, where you're
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, right. So that the line also between the author and the reader of the narrative is the classic line that the postmodernists make so much about, right? It is really is undermined significantly. That's also an important part of Dialogos. And so,
yes,
go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that's a lot like computer games as well. So
Yeah.
I mean that's also the playing with narrative, and so I see Dialogos in that sense also related to the kind of the because you talk about how gaming brings about the flow state, right?
Yeah. No, I
yeah,
like
so so I was kind of toying with the idea, but because you talk about the narrative practice hypothesis, but then Dialogos is the practice of the narrative. It's like it just makes perfect sense to me that way somehow.
Yeah, I mean, one way of thinking about it, I hadn't thought about it, and if you'll allow me to riff on this a bit. So this is just on the moment, but when I'm doing the work I do on the philosophy of pedagogy, I talk about a particular pedagogical style that tries to integrate argumentation in the Socratic sense, not the Cartesian sense, argumentation and narrative together, and that would, I think that's very much what Dialogos is doing. Strun,
Right.
do more about this.
Sorry?
I think this is. Do more about this. I really like this idea that this is a way of going sort of trans-narrative that allows us to, exact the narrative function into something that is more consonant with our current non-teleological worldview. I think that's a brilliant insight. I really like this. I really like this.
Okay, well, I'm sure I'll be telling you a lot more about it in the coming weeks or months, because this is something that I'm kind of on my own, just trying to puzzle out. So. Expect more.
Okay, good. But like I said, if the last piece I said, I think would be important to integrate in that, there's a pedagogical principle that is now different than the standard pedagogical principle of narrative.
I would say that the Platonic dialogues are very much pedagogical, right?
Yes,
they're
exactly.
Trying to exactly. You're aiming for all of that. So that's what I see.
Yeah. And people a person to take a look at, among others, is Drew Hyland, because he talks a lot, and this is the new reading that I've been mentioning. He talks a lot about paying attention to the drama in addition to the argument. And drama is a kind of narrative. So I think this is all converging very nicely.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And also, Christopher Mastropietro's way of trying to, I was just listening to your podcast about art with Andrew Sweeney, and a lot of these issues also tying in there again as well with art as well. And so I think all of these things are coalescing somehow.
So what about this then, Strawn? What about Dialogos as a reinventio of narrative, given all the work that Andrew and Chris?
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, and then it also, the issues that you're having with Jonathan Peugeot and stuff, that also it helps to build a better platform for communication, I think.
I think that's right. That's exactly why I like this. That's why I'm excited about it. It might be for more fruitful dialogue between theism and non-theism as well.
Yes, very much so. Very, very much so. I've actually got a lot of thoughts about that as well. I don't know if you want me to jump in there with that or wait for another question, but yeah.
Well, you do know that I don't respond to everything, but you can tell by what I do that I read what you have to say and I take it into account. So.
Yeah, definitely. And so I could also email it.
That's great. I appreciate that. Okay. Send me that email, and I think I'll copy Chris on it. I'll get Chris looped into it.
Okay, I'll do that.
Because narrative is his sort of narrative and drama are his chosen forms of art that he thinks are really central to this whole project.
I remember the way that he spoke about I think it was Frankenstein with Andrew Sweeney, and I was really impressed with his literary analysis. So I would really look. I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, he also did one about Our Town, the play Our Town. It was just amazing.
I'm not familiar with it, but I heard him speak about it, so I actually might even check that out.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for the rest of you. I'm not apologizing to Strun, because I just wanted to follow that whole dialogue up with Strun, because I think that this is a really not only philosophically important but practicably important point. So I just wanted to keep going with this a little bit. So thank you for your patience, everyone else.
Thank you very much for answering, John.
Thank you, Strun.
Great. So Manuel has a question now. John, Manuel is he's in our Sangha, and you've answered some questions of his on the YouTube streams, and he is the one who put together the 40-minute video for our that we're using for our meditation. So he's been fantastic.
Manuel, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope you weren't put off by the fact that we sort of delayed answering your question, right? And I wanted to get a situation where I gave you a chance to explicate it, which you did, and then I tried to respond to it in a stepwise fashion. I hope you found that helpful.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I still need to find out the answer, right? Because you were putting it in the future, but yeah, thanks. That was great.
Good.
So my question is, when we're trying to develop like rituals and games and whatever to have a little bit lower barrier of entry, right? Like and more accessible, right? This is with the scaling problem of Religio. So I was wondering if you could like paint the space and all the corners that we need to cover in order to have like a whole set, I guess.
So I mean, I'm not going to totally just put you off again, because I don't want you to get the sense that that's what I'm going to do with you. But I was just actually talking to Mark and Brett, and we want to we're going to set up a meeting, not this week, but next week, in which we start the project of like schematizing that about, what are sort of the design principles for setting up an ecology of practices, and then sort of a pedagogy, like a pedagogical program. And then my hope from that would be that once people get a sense of that, then people would get, because human beings tend to do this. If you give them those first two things, if you give them design functions and a pedagogical program, then they start to get good at generating. They get a sense of prototypes. They get a sort of prototypical sense of what a practice should look like, and that starts to guide them. And I'd like to do it this way explicitly, Manuel, because it's good if rituals emerge to some significant degree bottom up, right, rather than just trying to top down construct them. So my hope is if we get the schematization going, the way I've just described, and people start practicing it, then they will get a clear sense of, oh, this is what a good practice looks like. And I don't want to give a definition for the reasons I just gave you. So I'm not trying to be coy. Like I said, we're going to specifically try to address this very soon.
Right. But my question was a little bit different, though, right? Like.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood you. Please restate it then.
So what I was trying to get at is Religio has a certain essence, right? So
yeah.
What I wanted to hear is like, what would be that essence, right? Like what would be?
Oh yeah.
Like if you talk to a person on the street, like what would you need to offer that person in order to serve?
And now okay, sorry. I completely misunderstood you. Although I think what I just said was useful for the Discord server. So for me, the central thing is what you're offering people, and you're offering them, and these two are analytically distinct, but they're in practice they're conjoined. Is you're offering people systematic and reliable ways of overcoming self-deception and of enhancing the three axes of connection that we know like are generative of increased meaning in life. So the things that undermine meaning in life are, of course, an undermining of agency. That's the self-deceptive thing. And also people being ignorant about ways in which they can enhance the sense of connectedness to themselves, to each other, in the world. That sense of being of enhancing, all of these practices bring up the way in which we are religio, are connected. They bring them up and enhance them. You say that to people, they don't care. But if you say to them, but the point of enhancing religio is that is exactly the engine that drives enhanced experience, not just thought, enhanced experience, enhanced realization of meaning in life. Then that's what grabs people, because people want their lives to be more meaningful.
Okay, thanks. I think I can work with that.
Was that too complex, or did you want something even more elevator pitch?
Well, I'm just looking for spaces to explore, right? Like I'm trying to engage with this design idea, and I'm trying to get a map of the territory. So that's why I'm asking.
So the main functions that like I said, I think the main functions that people generally are looking to being addressed, they need how to be made aware of these functions, and like I said, some reliable ways of overcoming self-deceptive, self-destructive behavior, and then reliable ways of enhancing the sense of connectedness, the sense of religio itself. And typically people find those two things intrinsically valuable. They don't say, but why would I want to reduce self-deception? They just take that as, oh, that would make my life good. When you say, well, why would I want to enhance meaning in life? People don't ask that question. They just want enhanced meaning in life.
Okay, thanks for answering the question.
Thank you. I mean, I'm always open also, like through whatever channel, to, like, you've seen, refine a question, come back, and I'll try and answer it in a more refined fashion.
I'll definitely do that.
Please.
Hey, Karima, you have a question.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
Hello, John, and Wisdom Pilgrims. My question's on the understanding of self.
Yes.
And firstly, some see no difference between notions of self, soul, consciousness, person, the witnessing I, or the I am with, creative agency. But when exploring the self, you no doubt consider the no self. And this is my question.
Mm-hmm.
A few days ago, I learned of the Pudgalavada Buddhist philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And in case listeners don't know, it was a group of 5 of the early schools of Buddhism in India. And they had a belief in a self or person, not at all like today's Buddhism of no self, which I can never understand, given that most Buddhists believe in reincarnation, as did even Socrates. But anyways, will your reinventio of the self be using the current Buddhist ideas of no self, or the Pudgalavada view of a constant transcendent nature of self?
I'm sort of, I want to move beyond that. I'm actually teaching a course this year at the university on exactly this topic, and it's the central topic, the nature of the self. And so I don't want to answer you yet, because I'm specifically setting up a structure. And what I'm going to do is, and it's a 4th year seminar course, so I'm going to be working with some of the brightest students. And we're reading, some of the best anthologies, the Oxford Handbook on the Self, Evan Thompson's Self, No Self anthology, a bunch of other things. Because there is and you're already alluding to it, there's a lot of equivocation and confusion around this. What the term means, what both of them mean, how it sits with the other entities in this family resemblance, like soul and spirit and personality and character and consciousness. Many people, one of my sort of pet peeves is many people who pronounce no self, that all they do is shift all the functions to self-consciousness, and then that doesn't really really do anything. It just shifts around the metaphysics without answering anything. And other people have made that criticism. That's not my only criticism. So, Grima, what I want to do is I want to go through that, and I've talked to Amar about this. We're going to do that. And then once that course is done, and I've sort of had a chance to really Logos test the ideas and the arguments, then I'm going to release that as a sequence of lecture videos to my channel. So that I'm devoting a lot of effort to answering this question. It's going to be a premier thing I do. It's going to be some of the generated content, but that's not going to come out to basically like January of next year, because the course I'm teaching goes from September to December.
Gosh. Well, it sounds wonderful. I'm very happy you're doing that. And, I don't know why the universe brought this article of the Padgalavada school to my attention, but I had no idea that, before India didn't have so many Buddhists, that there was, a belief in, very different than what I think of as Buddhist nowadays.
Yeah, many people have said that. There's been a lot of scholastic work around the deeper connections between Vedanta and Buddhism. There are many people who are now arguing for a deep continuity between them rather than the sort of traditional oppositional presentation of Buddhism and aspects of Vedanta. And so, yeah, this is all extremely up in the air, even within classic, sort of Buddhist studies and Vedantic studies. And I'm not, I don't want to try to I can't do an exhaustive thing of all of these. So what I want to do is instead look at the current, the sort of the best, to my mind, the best overall take of the debate as it has found itself into modern cognitive science, because that's where I know how to play the game well. And so that's how I'm going to try and respond to this question as deeply as I can.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Rob G., you have a question. Wait, did Rob G. just pop off and...
can you guys hear me?
He's back. Yes. Yeah, welcome.
Okay, I hit the wrong button. There's too many buttons on this thing. Yeah, my question, John, kind of leads to some of the earlier points that Strawn was making. So I'm just going to say, what's a problem when you're meaning making or sense making and using kind of an information processing model or a narrative model versus what you're talking about? And then also, like, how might one use your model in a small world network more than kind of the old-fashioned regular network that we grew up in?
It's good to talk to you, Rob.
Likewise.
Yeah, I believe I owe you some emails too. So I have not forgotten about them. So
I don't think you're busy at all.
So I mean, so 4E cognitive science is basically all around the way in which the standard way of understanding information processing has been the computational model, and then that and part of what's going on is the idea that smuggles in an entire Cartesian framework, and then sort of for Heideggerian and Wittgensteinian reasons, and beyond that has all come into question. And then what's replacing it is a dynamical systems model. Now, the interesting thing is one of the things that Alicia Uraro, and she's the Dynamics in Action is the book on how you sort of shift into using dynamical systems theories to understand cognition. She did explicitly, though, in that book, and I mentioned this, she did argue that narrative was actually very important, and we missed its functionality from the standard information processing, precisely and this was really interesting because her argument was not the content of narrative. She was arguing that what narrative does is actually instantiate like a dynamical system style of processing in our cognition, the part of our cognition of which we can be sort of self-aware. Because what narrative does is it gets you tracking multiple variables in a self-organizing fashion. You have the foreshadowing, the feedback, the layering, the sensitive dependence on changes in initial conditions. You have characters, which are soft. So she gives this whole very powerful argument that why narrative is so important to us. But what's interesting is it's totally different than the literary style analysis of narrative, because she was emphasizing not any of the content. She was emphasizing basically the pattern. I guess the way of putting it, you actually instantiate a kind of cognition that enables you to better track dynamical systems. And I think that actually is a more powerful way of talking about Hutto's narrative practice hypothesis. Hutto made it sort of very formulaic, although he later on also comes to reject content models. He does that in the work with Mayan. So I think if we, what I really liked with Strawn was the shift to that, to trying to get a focus on, what do I want to say? Sort of the phenomenology and functionality that is being instantiated in us in narrative, rather than the actual content of the narrative. And so this is like what you're doing in Lexio, and this is like what you're doing in circling, where you're moving off of the content of what you're speaking, and the speech is now more directed towards enabling the dynamical system to get into a flow state within distributed cognition. That's how I see this. I mean, that we would start to treat narrative as something that is much more about instantiating that flow in distributed cognition that gives us, it gives us a transformative space rather than just a space in which we might be reconceptualizing or even rethinking about how we solve problems, which is what sort of standard narrative practice does. So the model I'm having in mind when I'm answering you, Rob, is when I talked about this, when people are doing Jeep form and they're sort of enacting drama and they're trying to deliberately bleed between it's like active role playing, bleed between enacting the drama and the patterns within their so-called real lives. The explicit intent of that kind of narrative drama is to bleed between what's happening within the drama and what's happening in their lives. And so I see that as a very important form of ritualized serious play that is designed to shift the focus onto the instantiation of a dynamical system rather than onto the particular content that we normally focus on when we're doing narrative. I hope that answers your question, but that's what I think is important here.
Sorry, John, can I just...
Can I ask a follow-up real quick?
Pardon me? So,
can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, so if in the kind of the old network, I'm just trying to find good nodes and absorb their information, or I'm trying to put out good information, like what would I do differently if I'm in this more dialectic network, or I don't know quite how to say it.
You just done it. You what you do is you look for the design principles by which and the type of network that is resulting. So the model there is like I said, and this is why I'm doing all this work with Dan Chiappi. The way the scientists keep reconfiguring their social organization in order to manage the rovers on Mars. They've got a deliberately dynamic constantly restructuring small world network organization. And so it's not just that they're connecting to the right people. They pay a lot of attention to the way in which they're connected. So there's an awareness of design on connection and the kind of network that is being engendered. So you're not just trying to connect to the right people. You're really trying to connect in the right way, where that means, according to the right principles, that will afford this kind of instantiation, reliable instantiation a dynamically restructuring small world network.
Sorry, John, I just wanted to quickly jump in there because this thought just occurred to me. It sounds very much to me like you're taking that you think that narrative is by default horizontal and you're trying to reappropriate it to make it address the vertical.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Yes, that's right. And that goes exactly to the answer to Rob, because part of that verticality is right. I'm not reducing it to this form, but part of that verticality is a meta awareness, right? A sort of metacognitive awareness of the functionality that, rather than it being transparent to you. And so
exactly,
it's
like an exception.
Yes, exactly. Rob, did that answer your follow-up question?
Yeah, this was great. That gave me a lot of very abstract things to think about.
Well, I get that. But the point is, you need to pair that very abstract with the stuff I'm trying to exemplify when I'm doing the dialogos with people.
Yeah, no, that part makes sense perfectly, yeah.
Great. That was a good, thanks, Ron. I think that was a good additional follow-up point. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great. Ben, you have a question for John.
Hi, John. Ben here. I had a question coming up today in relation to the lesson that you gave. I was wondering if you see a legitimate continuity between this Epicurean idea of a joy of being and the jhanas in Buddhism.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I mean, they come from sort of a different ontology, and they belong to sort of different pedagogical programs. But I think they might be both instantiating that, I forget the Sanskrit term, that sense of bliss, right? Mm-hmm. The bliss in being. Yeah, right. I'm trying to get something analogous. But where I see a potential pedagogical difference, so while I agree that there's a convergence in that sense, I see the Epicurean practice as a more accessible in the sense that we've been talking about here, the scalability, that they're more off the street accessible to people. It's a way of getting that tasting of the bliss of being that doesn't require the hours of absorption and training that the jhanas typically require of people.
Mm-hmm. It definitely seems to be the case that the Epicurean practices occur in the context of a householder life rather than in a monastic setting.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm trying to, and I think this is fair to McClellan because I think this is directly his intent. But I'm trying to expand on that by teaching the Epicurean practices, sort of extended Epicureanism, that in a way that seeds Stoicism and seeds Neoplatonism, so that in one sense it'll be standalone, accessible. This is my attempt to address the scalability problem. So I'm trying to get both these things. It'll be standalone, accessible, but it also will seed people so they can go to these deeper levels.
So I am hoping that there can be this symptomata between the traditions and understanding the joy of being in terms of jhanas and the jhanas in terms of the joy of being, and also that continuity between the shallow accessible and what's deep.
Totally. I mean, that's the intent. I mean, the intent of presenting, I keep using this metaphor because it keeps coming to mind. I see the Eastern and Western traditions like the two fields of vision, and the point is to figure out how to actually integrate them into a kind of depth perception.
I don't know how appropriate it would be to go into specifics, but this is salient to me because I've been studying and practicing the jhanas recently in my meditations, and it seems like there's a lot of overlap in the material that many meditation teachers use to pedagogically to instruct students on these states, and the kind of practices that are being discussed in this section of the course. These things about attending to the stable and subtle pleasures inherent in states of mind and body that are free from suffering and whatnot.
Yep, I think so. I would also hope that, Ben, that it would go the other way. So I was really impressed by some work that Willoughby Britton's done on, that these jhanas, you're aware of this, this, like the schemas and taxonomies you get from the East. There isn't one. There's a whole bunch of them, and they right, and some have 5, and some have 27, and and the problem is, sorry, I mean this as a gentle criticism, but I've encountered it. Perhaps you have too. You encounter parochialism around this, right? You encounter people that say, "Well, if you don't do 27, you just don't get it," and it's really disheartening to people. And I take Willoughby Britton's point to be well. There's no sort of non-parochial justification for any one of these schemas, right? And so, if we could get a better discussion going east-west, that might help to orient people more towards, a convergent functionality rather than a parochial commitment to any particular taxonomy.
Yeah, and something that real practice always seems to be pointing to is assessing things in terms of your own experience and getting out of dogmatic adherence to parochial views and whatnot.
Well, that's exactly, you're right. So the idea of trying to set up sort of a dialogos between these two traditions is my way of trying to, and that's in fact explicitly why I'm teaching the true tradition. It's to give people a platform that will afford what you just said, afford them actually shifting towards that trans-parochial kind of orientation to the practice.
So it's definitely something very salient to me because of my background, and so I'll be trying to work on that and with this community as we go on.
Excellent. I mean, one of the great things that makes me don't take it that I'm saying that my pleasure about things matters or is normative. But one of the things that is pleasing me is how so many people are being drawn to this community, of really high caliber, and also, high caliber in many different dimensions, and nevertheless ways that are in which they're convergent with each other. I think that's very, very powerful. I think that's really good. Well,
thank you for your time and care in interfacing with this community and answering this question and all of that. There's just one thing. This isn't very important, but just to clear this up, I'm showing up on the YouTube live stream says with this string of consonants, ADM, ZMF. And there's multiple bends on the stream, and just for the sake of clearing up any identity confusions.
So I know that you're the band attached to that string. I
know
that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Just I'm sorry about the pseudonym.
No, I don't actually. I don't actually. People have all kinds of reasons by which they manage the presentation of their identity on these public forums. I don't challenge that because I don't know what the particular circumstances are.
Well, thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Ben.
Mike G, you're up next.
Hello, John. Thank you, as always, for all the work that you're doing and you being a part of this Discord group.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you for thanking me. It's always helpful to me to hear that, by the way.
Yeah, you deserve it all the time. I think your work is constantly deserving of praise. So my question is, I'm actually feeling honestly a little struggle in even asking it. And
please.
I don't even know if it should even be bothered because it seems like it would involve a kind of much deeper discussion that I don't want to take away from others in asking their questions. But the question is, it's going to sound probably relatively simple, but it's for a much broader question going on in my head that I'm curious about. And I don't know if it's going to go there, and I'm not meaning to force it or anything like that. And like I said, to take up anybody's time. But basically the question is, I'm wondering if you could speak on the current state of cognitive research, or not even necessarily cognitive research, but just any kind of consciousness research or anything to do with consciousness, the general frame of the idea, and as it relates towards evolution. And how is it appearing as though the research is moving in a direction of that there is signs, or there aren't as many signs, that we are having this desire to craft religion? And particularly so, my question is wanting to point toward religious praxis. Yeah. And the way that we have this, what is appearing to me, and like I said, I don't have the science behind this at all, but it appears to me as being there's this innate desire on our part to craft religion and praxis in particular, and that if there isn't a particular framing in which we are pointing this toward, in the case of the mysterium, in the sense of like any type of religious tradition, and it's pointing in that direction of the mysterium, that if that's not there, it still has this desire to flow itself out into praxis. And we can see this in varieties of instances in the human frame in the last, certainly I'm seeing it in your Awakening from the Meaning Crisis and post Martin Luther. It just seems to just be constantly coming out. Time and time and time again. And so that's the basis of my question.
That's a great question, and you're right. It's a deep answer, but my answer to that is going to start coming out next week or the week after. So I have started recording an ongoing Dialogo series with Greg Enriquez, and called "Untangling the World Knot: The Hard Problems of Mind and Meaning." They're exactly about what's our best account of consciousness, and why do we need to bring in, because Greg and I have written some blogs together on this. Why do we need to bring into it the relationship to the problem of meaning in life, not semantic meaning? And so we are doing that. And so it's a sequence of sort of hour and 15-minute conversations between he and I, genuine dialogos. I come at it, of course, from sort of the angle of philosophy and cog sci. And while Greg is very philosophically literate, he comes at it from his as a psychologist and a psychotherapist. And so we are directly addressing exactly what you're asking. And we, like I said, we've recorded 4 already, and that's only about we're only about a third of the way through the argument. So I suspect it's going to be a total of 12 video recordings of Greg and I exploring exactly these connections that you're pointing to. So yes, very much. So and what we're both trying to do with our respective expertise is to bring together and condense as much of the current cognitive science and psychology and neuroscience, etc., but also people talking about transformations of consciousness and transformations of self-consciousness. That's the overlap with therapy and mystical experiences. We're trying to bring all of that together and put it into an integrated presentation. And like I said, we've recorded 4 of those. I'm just working with Amar to get some of the editing and a few of the window dressing up, and then we're going to start releasing them like next week. So I'm gonna try and give you basically a 12-hour answer to that question.
Okay. I guess a follow-up question to that. I'm curious if you have any plans within this space to speak directly with anybody from within a religious studies background. It's somebody focusing specifically on a large, broad, general understanding of religious studies, as opposed to like a specific religious studies area.
I'm talking to one person who's emeritus from that, and I've mentioned him already, because I think one of the most important books from somebody, he's emeritus religious studies in the last 15 years, is James Carse's The Religious Case Against Belief, and then his follow-up book, Finite and Infinite Games. And we are recording a Dialogos together on Peter Lindbergh's Stoa towards the end of this month. So that's coming down the pipe.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
And I should just say on the subject of simple questions, not that I think that was all that simple question. I want to encourage people to ask simple questions. You don't have to just think of the deepest question possible. I know a lot of people like to do that, and we love those questions. But if you have just a simple question about a concept you didn't understand from, say, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, or just want to clarify something, we want those questions just as much as the more detailed ones as well.
Can I follow up, Brett? And I'm just conscious of what happened. I want to recognize what happened between Manuel and I. I might also get the question type wrong, because we just have voice and we're just meeting. And so if I'm getting the type of question you're answering wrong, please let me know. I won't be offended or anything. I want to know. I want to make sure that I'm answering the question as it's intended. That I'm not categorizing it the wrong way or putting it at the wrong level of response. So I encourage people to make sure that I know I know that's too strong. That I have grasped the sort of the intent of the type of question and the level at which people want it addressed. I want to be responsive. I aspire to exemplify Socrates' capacity to really adjust and fit his answer to where the interlocutor is speaking from.
Excellent. Mark, you have a question.
Hello, John. Of course, I have a question. I've been, we had Peter Lindbergh here, and he was talking about the memeplex, which is a term I despise. And so we actually we renamed it because we can do that. And so one of his concerns is that, sort of like when you're out in the memeplex, it's too easy for your message to get either lost or manipulated or something like that. And then so I like I said, we sort of have this reformulation of the memeplex that we're that basically we're using to outcompete memes in some sense, right? And we're calling it the realm of transformative coupling. And the imagining is something like, well, memes are these very low-res icons, attachments or something that aren't really symbols, they aren't really metaphors, they aren't really parables. And so I was wondering if there's something in that space, and this is sort of to Manuel's point, I guess, in some way, right, where the available cogsci and all of the available knowledge you bring to bear on in terms of ecology of practices, if there's an easy way sort of into that space of transformative coupling, through symbols, or maybe what the history tells us about symbols that are accessible to people and how we involve them and therefore compete in the memeplex, as it were, with better tools, and what your thoughts were around that.
So, I think that's an excellent question, and I don't have the relevant expertise in that, but I was fortunate, and I did mention it to you guys. What needs to be created are basically new genres, and so this is not meant to be exhaustive, Mark. It's meant to be exemplary. I think what Akira the Dawn did with the meaning wave, I think this is a powerful way, because he's breaking genres. He's creating a new genre. He's creating something that looks like a meme or it looks like a jingle, but it's actually not, right? It's designed to basically draw people in and draw them into a deeper conversation. It's not. So while it's like the way a parable undermines standard narrative, it looks like a meme and it draws people in, but it's actually designed to my mind, and this is what I came across in the discussion with him, it's actually designed to undermine the stance that people take when they're consuming memes and actually draw them into a deeper engagement. I like what you called it, right? What did you call it? Some kind of coupling? What was the name again?
The realm of transformative coupling.
transformative coupling. And so what he's trying to do with the meaning wave, right, is to create something that's seductive in the sense that it looks like a meme, or it's like it's seductive like a parable. It looks like a meme. It draws you in, and then it explodes the very consumerist, superficial salience attitude that drives the memeplex, and undermines it by getting people. It basically ushers them into that kind of transformative coupling. I don't have the skill to do that. I don't. But why I was so interested in what he was doing and talking to him is because, like, again, I'm not saying that's, again, I want to repeat, it's not exhaustive, but it's exemplary of the kind of thing that is needed. That's exactly the kind of thing that is needed. I can't generate that. I don't have the skills. I don't have the expertise. But people who do, like him, I think need to generate things of that ilk.
Yeah, we're certainly on the same page on that. So I guess as a hopefully quick follow-up, although probably not, I hear you talking about stealing the culture and right. So what happened, say, during the last time the culture got stolen, that we can look at perhaps, to utilize. I mean, I know one thing that somebody who comes on here occasionally mentioned was the whole idea behind the French Revolution was sort of spawned off by art, for example, right? So that's sort of, any handles that we have into that, and then hopefully we'll get the artists, right, or we have availability to the artists to do the work once we can schematize it for them to some extent.
Right, and then what's also needed. So the example that comes to mind is, the one that I tend to use is, how Christianity stole the culture of the Roman Empire, and you have to. Well, part of what the answer is exactly what's happening here. You have to build communities, but you also have to network communities together. That's why the thing that Rafe Kelly did a couple of weeks ago, the Movement Summit, where you had all these emerging communities of practice and their attendant research, and we were getting together, and there was this very rich exchange. And it wasn't any attempt to, nobody was saying my way is the way or my community is the community. It was this attitude of, no, let's all find a way to network together, because that's what's actually happening, right? You've got what the Christians did was they set up all these churches, but they also had mechanisms, informal mechanisms, almost shamanistic mechanisms, where people are constantly moving between the churches, either literally by journeying or by letters. And what you have for a very long time is you don't have the hierarchical structure that became the Catholic Church. You had instead this co-op that was constantly redesigning and redefining itself. And I think that's also something it's not just a matter of how we present the material. It's also important to think about how we grow the culture, and I mean literally, how do we afford what I was talking to Rob about? How do we afford the formation of dynamically, continually restructuring and redefining small world network of these emerging communities of practice? I think this is a very important problem. And again, this is part of why I'm talking to Jordan Hall so much. I don't have the relevant expertise for that, but I'm trying to find the people who do, and that's also why I'm doing all that work with Dan Chiappi about the scientists and how they move the rovers around, because I want to understand possible ways in which human beings can make these kinds of dynamical small world networks in the social organization of distributed cognition, so that we can better afford this. We have to internet people together if we're going to compete with the way the mindless and impersonal aspects of the internet create the memeplex. We have to have something that competes with it in real time.
Yeah, I thought that was something like what your answer would be. So yeah, I think we're going to go after the art next, right? That's probably our next big push. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. that's good feedback.
Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it, and thank you for that follow-up, these questions, Mark, because, like I said, I think you indicated that it might also give a more cogent response to Manuel, which I'm happy about. So thank you for that.
Do you have time for two more, John?
I have time for one more. How's that?
All right, Velaskin, you've got the last question.
Hi, John. So the Rutnar discussion here kind of ground to a halt a little bit, and then we had a little discussion, and we decided that we had to formulate the problem and work out the functionality of religion.
Yes.
In order to address the problem properly. So we're doing that, and we've divvied up the topics to address. And mine is the perennial problems. So I thought I would ask you to help me cheat on my homework and tell me what your concept of the perennial problems are, like maybe a short list or something.
Well, I could do something better. I can email to Brett a document that Christopher and I have written that tries to lay out, as in succinct and comprehensive a fashion as we can, a principal taxonomy of the perennial problems. I could email that, and he could make that available to you guys. Would that be helpful?
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, but take it with the right way. Again, none of this is meant to be exhaustive or complete. I'm hoping it will be helpful scaffolding for you guys.
Yeah, it would be very helpful.
So, Brett, let's make sure that. Can I ask you to make sure that I do this?
Absolutely.
I'm giving you free permission to harass me till I make sure that I get that document to you, because I do want to help that way.
Definitely, I'll follow up with that. And thank you so much, John, for coming out again. Now, so this was a makeup week because we missed last week, and you've been kind enough to let us get back on track. So you will actually be back next week. It's
exactly right, Brett. I will be here next week to again. Every time I do this, I find the caliber of questions. I find it's getting they're getting just progressively better and better, and they were very good to begin with. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy to be here again next week. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. But again, just a reminder, they don't have to be the great deep questions.
Exactly.
Simple questions are great too.
Exactly. So let's all work to help each other address the scalability issue.
However, there's no shame in one-upping yourself.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but both directions are welcomed. Both directions are welcomed.
So thank you very much, again, John. Thank you again, John. Thanks, Strawn, and everyone else who asked questions tonight. Thank you, Manuel, for recording. And again, we'll be back next week. So stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John.